My boss canceled my security badge at 6 a.m. By 9 a.m., the defense client canceled a $38 million renewal. I arrived at Morrison Defense Dynamics at 6:15 a.m., coffee in hand, ready for the biggest day of the year, the $38 million contract renewal with the Defense Department. I'd spent 10 years building this division from nothing. 10 years of 80-hour weeks, missed birthdays, and sacrificed weekends. This renewal was my legacy. I swiped my badge at the security turnstile. Red light. Error beep. I tried again. Same result. The security guard, Marcus, looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Hayes, I need you to step aside." "Marcus, what's going on?" "I have a presentation in 3 hours." He avoided my eyes. "Your credentials were deactivated at 6 a.m. this morning. Orders from executive leadership." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible." "Check again." He shook his head slowly. "Already checked twice. Your name's been removed from the entire system." Through the glass doors, I watched my boss, Rick Morrison, stride through the lobby with his signature arrogant smile. He saw me standing there, locked out like a stranger, and didn't even pause. That's when I knew, this wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. At 7:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from HR, "Jack Hayes, report to conference room B immediately." I waited in the lobby for 20 minutes before security issued me a visitor badge. A visitor badge. In the building I'd helped build. Conference room B was on the executive floor. Rick Morrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by the corporate lawyer and his wife, Karen Morrison, the company CFO. Karen's expression was ice. "Jack, have a seat," Rick said, not bothering with pleasantries. "What's going on, Rick? Why was my badge deactivated?" "We're restructuring," Karen interrupted, sliding a thick document across the table. "The company is moving in a new strategic direction." I stared at the NDA in front of me. "You're firing me? Today? We have the defense renewal in." "That's no longer your concern," Rick said flatly. "Sign the agreement. You'll receive 2 weeks severance." 2 weeks. After a decade. "This is illegal," I said, my voice shaking with controlled rage. Karen leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. "Sign it, Jack. Or I promise you'll never work in defense contracting again. I'll make sure of it personally." The conference room door opened, and Madison Morrison walked in like she owned the place, which, technically, she did. Rick and Karen's daughter, fresh out of business school with her MBA and zero real-world experience. She wore a designer blazer and heels that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. But what caught my attention was the badge clipped to her lapel, a Level 4 security clearance badge. My old clearance level. "Sorry I'm late," Madison said, not sounding sorry at all. She didn't even glance at me as she set her phone on the table. "Madison will be taking over as senior project director," Rick announced, pride oozing from every word. "She'll be handling the Defense Department contracts going forward." My contracts. My clients. My 10 years of work. Madison finally looked at me, her expression somewhere between pity and contempt. "No offense, Jack, but innovation requires fresh perspectives. The industry is evolving, and frankly, legacy thinking is holding us back." Legacy thinking. That's what she called a decade of expertise. "Good luck with Colonel Davis," I said quietly, standing. "He's very particular about protocol and experience." For just a moment, Madison's confident smile faltered. Then she recovered. "I'm sure we'll manage just fine." I drove home in complete silence. No radio. No podcasts. Just the sound of my own breathing and the hum of tires on asphalt. My phone started buzzing before I even pulled into my driveway. Text after text. Call after call. Elena Chen, my lead systems engineer. Jack, what the hell is happening? I just got fired. David Martinez, senior analyst, they're clearing out the entire R&D team. Did you know about this? 15 messages in total. 15 people I'd personally hired and mentored. All terminated in the same morning sweep. Rick Morrison wasn't just removing me, he was erasing every trace of my influence. The last message hit differently. It was from Elena again. They're scrubbing your name from every project file. Going through the servers and reassigning authorship. It's like you never existed here. I sat in my car, staring at my phone, and felt something cold settle into my chest. Not panic. Not despair. Clarity. I opened my laptop and found the resignation email I'd drafted last night, a professional, gracious goodbye letter. My finger hovered over the send button for exactly 3 seconds. Then I deleted it. They thought this was over. They had no idea it was just beginning. My phone rang at 9:47 a.m. The caller ID read, Col Davis, DOD. Colonel Raymond Davis. The Defense Department's Senior Project Oversight Officer. The man who controlled the $38 million renewal. Colonel, I answered, keeping my voice steady. Jack, where the hell are you? His voice was tight with anger. I just sat through the most embarrassing briefing of my career. Some kid in expensive shoes couldn't answer a single technical question about the missile guidance protocols you designed. I'm no longer with Morrison Defense, sir. Silence on the other end. Then, explain. I gave him the short version. Terminated this morning, effective immediately, no transition period. Jesus Christ, Davis muttered. Morrison didn't even have the decency to notify us? We're supposed to sign a $38 million renewal based on your team's work, and he fires you the same morning? Apparently fresh perspectives are more valuable than institutional knowledge, Colonel. Bullshit. Davis's anger was palpable. Jack, I need you to listen carefully. I'm offering you an immediate consulting contract. Off the books, advisory capacity. I need someone who actually knows what the hell they're talking about. My heart rate quickened. I accept. Good. And Jack? I just postponed the renewal meeting. Indefinitely. Using my new consultant credentials from Colonel Davis, I logged into the Defense Department's contractor portal that night. My access level was different now, higher, actually. I could see archived project files that even Rick Morrison couldn't access. Every keystroke felt dangerous. If anyone discovered what I was doing, it could be considered corporate espionage. Or worse. But I knew these systems better than anyone. I'd designed half of them. I navigated to the legacy database, the encrypted archive where all original contract bids and technical specifications were stored. It took me 3 hours to find what I was looking for, buried under layers of outdated file structures. And there it was. The original missile guidance test data from 3 years ago. The data that won Morrison Defense the initial contract. I opened the files side by side, the raw test results versus the official submission to the Defense Department. They didn't match. Rick Morrison had falsified the testing data. He'd manipulated the failure rates, inflated the accuracy metrics, and completely fabricated the environmental stress test results. It was fraud. Federal contract fraud. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Then I began methodically downloading everything, time-stamped, authenticated, backed up to 3 separate encrypted drives. Rick Morrison had made his first mistake. He'd given me a reason to dig. Karen Morrison called my cell phone 3 days later. Jack, I'm so glad I caught you. I've been meaning to reach out. Her voice dripped with false warmth. Karen Morrison didn't do anything without calculation. What can I do for you, Karen? I wanted to make sure there were no hard feelings about the transition. These business decisions are never personal, you understand. Of course, I lied smoothly. She paused, then shifted tone. I also wanted to confirm, you didn't retain any proprietary materials when you left, did you? No backup files, no client lists, nothing like that? There it was. The real reason for the call. Everything was on company servers, Karen. I followed protocol. Good, good. Because you know those materials are legally protected. Any unauthorized retention could result in serious legal consequences. I'm aware of the law. Another pause. Then she dropped the pretense. A few firms have reached out to me recently. Competitors interested in our client portfolio. I'd hate for any former employees to be sharing proprietary information. That would be very unfortunate for everyone involved. After we hung up, I smiled. Karen wasn't just covering up the fraud. She was already shopping Morrison Defense's client list to competitors, preparing to jump ship before the whole operation collapsed. They weren't just burying me. They were stealing my life's work to save themselves. I spent the next 48 hours building my ghost. Apex Systems Solutions. Registered in Delaware. Clean business license. Professional website with generic stock photos and carefully worded service descriptions. Untraceable ownership through an LLC structure. The company specialized in data migration, security audits, and technical consulting for defense contractors. I made the website look slightly cheaper than Morrison Defense, desperate enough to undercut competitors, professional enough to be credible. Then I waited. Madison Morrison was in over her head. I knew it. Colonel Davis knew it. And soon, she'd know it too. 3 days after I launched the website, my new business email pinged. Apex Systems Solutions, we need immediate technical support for a contract compliance review. Defense Department audit scheduled in 2 weeks. Urgent data migration required. Please contact Madison Morrison, Senior Project Director, Morrison Defense Dynamics. She'd found me. Or rather, she thought she'd found a desperate contractor willing to do emergency work. I drafted a professional proposal, quoted her a reasonable rate, and sent it within the hour. 20 minutes later, I received a signed contract and purchase order. Madison Morrison had just hired me to audit her own company. I was officially back inside. I showed up at Morrison Defense the following Monday morning wearing a cheap suit and carrying a contractor laptop. Security issued me a temporary visitor badge, level 2 access, enough to reach the technical floors. Madison barely looked at me during the kickoff meeting. Just migrate the legacy files to the new compliance database. We need everything organized before the Defense Department audit. Understood, I said, keeping my voice neutral and forgettable. She had no idea who I was. To her, I was just another faceless contractor. I spent 3 days working in the server room, appearing to organize files while embedding my real work, audit software disguised as routine system maintenance. It logged every financial transaction, every email, every file transfer across the entire corporate network. The software was elegant, invisible, and completely illegal if anyone discovered it. But they wouldn't. Because I designed Morrison Defense's security protocols. 72 hours after installation, my encrypted laptop began receiving data streams. And what I found made the falsified test data look like a parking ticket. $4.2 million in offshore wire transfers. Payments flowing from a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands directly to Rick Morrison's personal accounts. The shell company traced back to a Chinese technology firm that was barred from Defense Department contracts. Rick Morrison wasn't just committing fraud. He was potentially selling defense secrets to foreign entities. The Defense Department's Inspector General requested an emergency financial audit of Morrison Defense Dynamics exactly 1 week after I installed my monitoring software. I watched the chaos unfold through my remote access. Rick Morrison stormed through the executive floor, screaming at department heads. Madison scrambled to compile financial records that didn't exist. Karen started systematically deleting emails. The panic was beautiful. I sat in my home office with coffee, monitoring their internal communications in real time. It was like watching a criminal operation devour itself from the inside. How the hell did the IG even know to look at us? Rick shouted during an emergency executive meeting. Someone leaked something, Karen hissed back. We need to find out who. Madison's voice was shaky. Maybe it's just routine. Random selection? Random? Rick laughed bitterly. The IG doesn't randomly audit contractors the same week a major renewal is pending. My phone buzzed. Colonel Davis. Jack, I wanted to give you a heads up. We're pausing the $38 million renewal until the Inspector General's audit clears. How long will that take, Colonel? Could be weeks. Could be months. Depends what they find. He paused. Between you and me? I'd recommend they do a very thorough review. Sounds reasonable, sir. After we hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. Madison Morrison held a press conference 3 days later. I watched it live from my laptop. She stood behind a podium with the Morrison Defense logo prominently displayed, flanked by the company's PR team and lawyers. Recent rumors regarding Morrison Defense dynamics are completely unfounded, she read from prepared remarks, her voice steady but her hands trembling slightly. These allegations appear to be the work of a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind against this company. The reporters perked up. One called out. Can you name the employee? Madison hesitated, then leaned into the microphone. Jack Hayes was terminated 3 weeks ago for performance issues. Since then, he has apparently made it his mission to damage this company's reputation through false accusations and manufactured evidence. She named me. Publicly. On camera. The PR team tried to move on, but the damage was done. My name was now attached to this story. I sat back in my chair, watching her confident face on the screen. You just made this personal, Madison, I said quietly to the empty room. You should have kept my name out of your mouth. That night, I uploaded the complete audit trail, every falsified test result, every fraudulent financial document, every offshore payment, directly to the Defense Department Inspector General's secure portal. Anonymous submission. Encrypted. Impossible to trace. The industry news broke at 6:47 a.m. the next morning. Morrison Defense Dynamics under federal investigation for contract irregularities. The headline appeared simultaneously on Defense News, Federal Contractor Weekly, and 3 major business publications. Morrison Defense's stock price began plummeting the moment markets opened. Down 18% in the first hour. Down 34% by lunch. Emergency board meetings. Investor lawsuits filed. Credit lines frozen. I monitored their internal communications as the company tore itself apart. Rick Morrison's voice echoed through the executive floor. Who leaked this? Someone in this building is sabotaging us. Karen tried to maintain composure. We need crisis management. Get the lawyers on the phone now. Madison sat in her office, staring at her computer screen, visibly shaking. At 3:47 p.m., Karen's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I'd sent it from a burner app, untraceable. Justice has a timestamp. 6 a.m. was yours. 9 a.m. is mine. Through the network cameras, I watched Karen's face drain of color as she read the message. She stood abruptly, walked to Rick's office, and slammed the door. The empire was cracking. Karen confronted Madison in a private meeting late that evening. They thought they were alone in Karen's office. They were wrong. My monitoring software captured everything. This is your fault. Karen's voice was shrill with panic. Your incompetent press conference put a target on our backs. My fault? Madison shot back. You and Dad have been cooking the books for years. I inherited this disaster. The room went silent. Then Karen's voice turned cold. What did you just say? I'm not stupid, Mother. I've been reading the financial reports. The offshore accounts. The shell companies. You think I didn't notice? Madison, listen to me very carefully. No, you listen. I've been recording everything. Every meeting, every conversation. If this company goes down, I'm not going down with it. My screen flickered as new files appeared in my monitoring queue. Madison had been secretly recording company meetings for months, insurance against her parents throwing her under the bus. And in her panic, she just uploaded everything to the company cloud server to back it up. I began downloading immediately. The recordings proved everything. Rick and Karen discussing falsified bids. Karen instructing accountants to hide offshore payments. Rick bragging about deceiving Defense Department auditors. All of it, in their own voices. Madison had accidentally handed me the smoking gun. I reached out to Madison through my Apex Systems email, using the contractor identity she still didn't recognize. Ms. Morrison, given the current situation, I wanted to offer continued technical support during the investigation. Confidential consulting, if needed. She responded within minutes, can we meet? In person? I need advice from someone outside this company. We met at a coffee shop in Arlington. Madison looked nothing like the confident woman from the press conference. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook as she stirred sugar into coffee she wouldn't drink. I don't know who else to talk to, she said quietly. Everyone at the company is either lying or terrified. I kept my voice neutral, professional. What's your biggest concern? My father built that company on fraud. My mother helped him cover it up for years. And now they're going to blame me for everything. She looked up, tears forming. I was arrogant. Stupid. I thought I was inheriting a legitimate business. For the first time, I saw her as more than Rick's privileged daughter. She was a pawn, just like me. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm testifying before the Inspector General tomorrow morning. Full cooperation. I just want this nightmare to end. After she left, I sat there for a long moment. Then I sent an anonymous tip to the federal investigators, attaching Madison's recordings and suggesting immunity in exchange for testimony. Madison called my Apex Systems number the night before her testimony, panicked. I need your help. There's a backup data server at a remote facility. If I can access those files, they might prove I wasn't involved in the fraud. Where's the server located? I asked, already knowing this was the moment. She gave me an address, a storage facility in Maryland that Rick had mentioned in one of the recorded conversations. I'll look into it, I assured her. What Madison didn't know, that facility didn't contain exculpatory evidence. It contained Rick Morrison's actual fraud infrastructure, offshore payment servers, encrypted communications with foreign contacts, the real financial records he'd been hiding. I'd identified the location weeks ago through my monitoring software. When Madison reported the facility location to federal investigators the next morning as part of her testimony, it triggered an immediate FBI raid authorization. The FBI had been quietly building a case against Morrison Defense for months, waiting for enough evidence to justify a full raid. Madison had just handed them the final puzzle piece. At 6 a.m. the next morning, exactly 3 weeks after my badge was cancelled, FBI agents swarmed Morrison Defense Dynamics headquarters. Executives were arrested mid-meeting. Computers seized. Files boxed. Employees escorted out. Through the news helicopter footage, I watched Rick Morrison being led out in handcuffs. Perfect timing. Rick Morrison's perp walk was on every news channel. The footage was devastating, federal agents surrounding him, photographers shouting questions, Rick's face a mask of shock and rage as handcuffs clinked shut around his wrists. "Mr. Morrison, did you defraud the Defense Department? Mr. Morrison, what do you say to the fraud allegations? Is it true you accepted payments from foreign entities?" Rick said nothing, his lawyer frantically pushing through the crowd. I watched from my living room, coffee in hand, as the man who'd humiliated me 3 weeks ago was marched into a federal building to face charges that would end his career, his reputation, and his freedom. The news anchor's voice, Richard Morrison, CEO of Morrison Defense Dynamics, faces up to 40 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts. Charges include defense contract fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and potentially espionage-related offenses. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, one of my old engineers. "Did you see the news? Karma is real." I didn't respond. But I smiled. The evening news showed one final image, Morrison Defense Dynamics headquarters, dark and empty, with a federal seizure notice taped to the front door. Rick Morrison had built an empire on lies. And empires built on lies always fall. He just needed someone to push. Karen Morrison's attorney contacted federal prosecutors 2 days after Rick's arrest. She wanted to make a deal. I knew about the meeting because Colonel Davis had connections throughout the federal law enforcement community, and he'd been quietly keeping me informed as a professional courtesy. "She's throwing everyone under the bus," Davis told me over a secure call. "Her husband, her daughter, the whole executive team. She's claiming she was coerced and manipulated. Will they give her immunity?" I asked. "Doubtful. But they might reduce her sentence in exchange for testimony." What the prosecutors didn't know, I had a contact in the legal community, a former colleague who now worked in the federal courthouse. She owed me a favor from years ago. I called it in. 24 hours later, audio from Karen's proffer session, where she explicitly blamed Madison for masterminding the fraud, claiming her daughter manipulated both parents, mysteriously leaked to Defense Industry Today and Federal Contractor News. The recordings were devastating. Karen's voice, cold and calculating, throwing her own daughter under the federal bus to save herself. Madison was ambitious. Reckless. She pushed her father to cut corners, to win contracts at any cost. She's the real architect of this fraud. Complete lies. But captured on tape. When Madison heard the recordings, she called her mother one final time. "I hope it was worth it," Madison said, her voice dead. Then she hung up and never spoke to Karen again. Madison Morrison walked into the FBI's Washington field office the morning after her mother's betrayal became public. She was done protecting anyone. "I want to turn state's witness," she told the lead investigator. "Full cooperation. Complete testimony. Everything I know." What Madison provided was devastating. Details of Rick's offshore accounts. Names of foreign contacts. Evidence of Karen's money laundering operations. Locations of hidden servers and encrypted files. Testimony about bribes paid to lower-level Defense Department employees. But the bombshell was something even I hadn't discovered. Rick Morrison had been paying a senior Pentagon procurement officer, a man named Gerald Hutchins, $50,000 per quarter to steer contracts toward Morrison Defense and away from competitors. The scandal wasn't just corporate fraud anymore. It was government corruption. Madison's testimony triggered a cascade of additional arrests. 6 more Morrison defense executives. 3 Pentagon employees. 2 senators who'd received campaign donations linked to Rick's shell companies. The investigation expanded from a single defense contractor to a systemic corruption probe. Through my DoD contacts, I learned that investigators were offering Madison full immunity in exchange for her cooperation. Someone had submitted an anonymous recommendation to prosecutors, suggesting Madison was a victim rather than a co-conspirator. I never confirmed it was me. But Madison received her immunity deal 3 days later. Morrison Defense Dynamics filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 23 days after Rick's arrest. Total liquidation. The company would be dissolved, assets sold, employees terminated. The board of directors voted unanimously to shut down operations immediately. On the same day, the Defense Department formally issued its decision on the $38 million contract renewal. Due to material ethics violations, fraudulent representations, and ongoing federal criminal investigations, the Department of Defense hereby terminates all existing contracts with Morrison Defense Dynamics, effective immediately. The $38 million renewal contract is cancelled. All future business relationships are permanently suspended. I read the official statement 3 times, letting each word sink in. The contract Rick Morrison had built his empire around, the contract he'd fired me to protect, was dead. And it died because of his own greed. That afternoon, Rick Morrison gave a jailhouse interview to a legal affairs reporter. His attorney had advised against it, but Rick's ego demanded he tell his side. "This is all because of one disgruntled employee," Rick said, his voice bitter. "Jack Hayes. He destroyed everything I built because I made a simple business decision." The reporter pressed, "Are you saying Mr. Hayes fabricated evidence?" "I'm saying he had an axe to grind and he ground it right through my company." The interview aired that evening. By morning, it had gone viral. And I became a name. Colonel Raymond Davis scheduled a Pentagon press conference for 10 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. The topic: Department of Defense announces new defense partnership for advanced missile guidance systems. I was sitting in my home office when Davis called. "You're going to want to watch this, Jack." I pulled up the live stream. Davis stood at the podium, flanked by 2 generals and the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition. 3 weeks ago, we terminated our relationship with Morrison Defense Dynamics due to criminal fraud. Today, I'm pleased to announce we've selected a new partner for this critical national security project. He paused, looking directly into the camera. The contract has been awarded to Apex System Solutions, a firm led by someone this department has worked with for over a decade. Someone we trust implicitly. My heart rate spiked. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the CEO of Apex System Solutions, Jack Hayes. The press room erupted. Davis smiled. "Jack, you want to come up here?" I'd been in the building the whole time, waiting in a side room. I walked to the podium as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Hayes, you were the engineer Morrison Defense fired, correct? Mr. Hayes, did you orchestrate Morrison's collapse? Mr. Hayes, how does it feel to win the contract that destroyed your former employer?" I adjusted the microphone and looked directly at the cameras. "I'd like to thank Morrison Defense Dynamics for teaching me exactly what not to do." The fallout was immediate and total. Rick Morrison's assets, homes, cars, investments, everything, were frozen by federal order pending criminal trial and restitution proceedings. Karen Morrison filed for divorce 2 days after the Pentagon announcement, attempting to protect whatever money she could hide in the separation. The judge denied her request and froze her assets too. Madison Morrison disappeared from public life entirely. She changed her name legally, moved to Colorado, and started working as a technical writer under her new identity. She sent me one email: "Thank you for not destroying me along with them." I never responded. The old Morrison Defense building stood empty for months. Eventually, a medical device company bought it at auction for 30 cents on the dollar. 3 months after everything collapsed, I drove past the building one last time. On impulse, I pulled into the parking lot. The place was hollow now, windows dark, parking lot empty, the company sign removed. I walked to the main entrance. The security turnstile where I'd been locked out that morning was still there, dormant and dark. On the abandoned reception desk, someone had left something. My old Level 4 security badge. It had been reactivated. Today's date was stamped on the magnetic strip. Underneath was a handwritten note on Morrison Defense letterhead. "I'm sorry. M." I picked up the badge, looked at it for a long moment, then dropped it in the trash on my way out. Apex System Solutions moved into a new facility in Tysons Corner, Virginia, 12,000 square feet of modern office space with secured server rooms and a Defense Department certified research lab. My first act as CEO, I called every engineer, analyst, and technician that Rick Morrison had fired. Every single one. "I'm rebuilding the team," I told each of them. "Double your old salary. Equity stake in the company. Profit sharing. And we're doing this right, no shortcuts, no lies, no stolen credit." 15 people said yes within 24 hours. Elena Chen, my former lead engineer, cried when I offered her the position of Chief Technology Officer. "You're giving me equity?" she asked, disbelieving. "You helped build the technology," I said. "You should own part of it." Our first team meeting was small but powerful. 15 engineers sitting around a conference table, looking at each other with a mix of relief and determination. "We're building something clean here," I told them. "Something we can be proud of. No fraud. No deception. Just exceptional work." 2 weeks later, Colonel Davis called with news. "The Defense Department is impressed with your rebuild, Jack. We're offering a contract expansion, an additional $52 million over 5 years for next-generation systems development." I did the math. Combined with the original $38 million renewal, my new company now held $90 million in defense contracts. Rick Morrison's entire empire, rebuilt better in 3 months. Karen Morrison appeared in my lobby on a Thursday afternoon without an appointment. Security called up. "Sir, there's a Karen Morrison here to see you. She doesn't have a meeting scheduled." I almost said no. Then curiosity won. "Send her up." Karen looked nothing like the icy CFO I remembered. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by department store business casual. Her hair was graying. She'd aged 10 years in 3 months. She sat across from my desk, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I've lost everything," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My marriage. My reputation. My career. Everything." "You helped Rick commit federal fraud for years," I replied evenly. "What did you expect would happen?" I know what I did was wrong." She looked up, tears forming. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. Any job. Anything. I need to rebuild." I studied her face. This was the woman who'd threatened to destroy my career. Who'd helped erase my legacy. I slid a badge across the desk. "Level 1 access. Facilities maintenance. You want back in? You can start Monday. We need a supervisor for the cleaning crew. Minimum wage to start, with performance reviews every quarter." Karen stared at the badge like it was a snake. "You're giving me a job? Cleaning? You said any job. That's what's available." She picked up the badge with trembling hands. Behind her, the office door opened. Madison Morrison stood in the doorway, watching silently. Madison and I sat in my office after Karen left, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. "You gave my mother a job," Madison said finally. "She needed one. After everything she did to you?" I leaned back in my chair. "Your mother made terrible choices. But she's also a human being who's lost everything. Sometimes mercy is more powerful than revenge." Madison looked down at her hands. I wanted to apologize. Formally. For what I said at that press conference. For my arrogance. For being complicit in my parents' fraud, even if I didn't know the full extent. You were a pawn too, I said quietly. They used you just like they used everyone else. That doesn't excuse my behavior. I was cruel to you. Dismissive. I thought I was better than you because of my degree and my last name. She paused. I was wrong. I appreciate that. The FBI told me something last week, Madison continued. They said an anonymous source recommended I receive immunity instead of being charged as a co-conspirator. They said this source provided evidence that I was being manipulated by my parents. I said nothing. That was you, wasn't it? I can't confirm or deny anonymous submissions to federal investigators. Madison smiled sadly. Thank you. For giving me a chance to do the right thing. 3 days later, the judge handed down sentences. Rick Morrison, 18 years in federal prison. Karen Morrison, 8 years. Both ordered to pay $47 million in restitution. 6 months after everything began, I stood outside the Pentagon on a crisp October morning. In my hand was a new security clearance badge, Level 5, the highest civilian classification available. It had taken months of background checks, interviews, and clearance reviews. But I'd earned it. My phone buzzed. Colonel Davis, congratulations on the clearance. Well deserved. I looked at the badge, then at the old Morrison Defense badge I'd kept in my desk drawer, the one that had been deactivated at 6 a.m. on the worst morning of my life. Both badges told a story. One was about betrayal, humiliation, and loss. The other was about justice, redemption, and triumph. I walked to a document shredder in the Pentagon lobby and fed the old badge into the machine. The metal and plastic crunched and shattered, falling in pieces into the bin below. Then I clipped the new badge to my jacket and walked toward the morning sun. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Elena, team meeting at 10. We just landed another contract. DoD wants us for the next-gen satellite defense system. I smiled and replied, on my way. Behind me, the Pentagon stood massive and imposing, a symbol of everything I'd fought to protect and everything I'd almost lost. They'd cancelled my badge at 6 a.m., thinking they could erase me. By 9 a.m., they'd lost a $38 million contract. By the end, they'd lost everything. I walked to my car, the autumn sun warming my face. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of my reflection, older now, harder, but still standing. Still fighting. Still winning. The badge on my jacket caught the light, Level 5 clearance gleaming like a badge of honor. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the past behind me where it belonged, shredded, destroyed, and powerless. Some people think revenge is about destruction. They're wrong. Real revenge is about rebuilding yourself so completely that your enemies can only watch from the ruins of what they threw away. As I drove back to Apex System Solutions, back to my team, back to the life I'd built from nothing, one thought echoed in my mind. They thought they could decide my value. They were wrong. Only I get to decide that. And I decided I was worth everything they tried to take.